Good morning, Service Lines community. How y'all doing today? Andy Z, love
Morning.
having you on, brother. Glad to have you with me. Ah, well, Doug is out. He's getting his teeth drilled on or something like that. He's got a dentist appointment this morning, so we got my brother Andy Z on with me today, and it's gonna be a good topic. So, how how was your weekend? How's your week been going, man? I feel like it's been forever since I've seen you.
Yeah. Weekend's great. Got some golf in the week and just working on this business and having some fun. You know how it goes.
Yeah, oh yeah. I see you're rocking the AZ hat. So
Yeah,
you started a journey into promotional products, A to Z apparel. I love it, man. Love it. So you're starting off a new business, but you're no stranger to business. You helped another company prior, and so we're gonna kind of go from what you experienced before, what I experienced before, to the process as you're starting a new
yeah,
company. Just a brief overview. One of the things that I experienced is if you don't write it down and you're trying to grow and no one knows where to find the process, well, guess what? You can't be upset when we're not doing what you said because there's no reference point to it. So we're going to talk about that and kind of some tips and strategies to begin to document that process, especially as you're starting a business, just like Andy is. So good morning, Adam. Glad to have you along for the ride. I'm going to pray us up and then we'll dig into it. I'm sitting out here on a job site waiting for my guys to show up. Speaking of process, so here we go. Dear Father, thank you for this morning. Thank you for this time together. I pray that you would bless each of the people watching today, bless the conversation. And Father, we just pray that we go out, we do your will, and we serve our customers well. We pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen. Woo! Good old phone Wi-Fi. Everything's rolling in late. Good morning, Mike. Spent a week hanging out with him at the PSA conference in Virginia.
what a
Paul
great
Hartland,
way.
I'm looking for a flat brim hat, not just embroidery in the normal spot, but also on the brim. I do know that is possible, but it takes a little more work. So let's,
Yeah,
let's get you connected. Good
awesome.
morning, Dr. Dan. Also was out at PSA all week with his wife, Marion. It's great to spend some time with my brother, Dr. Dan. So first things first, right? So each of us probably has process as we know how to do our jobs, right? So appliance tech, HVAC tech, promotional products guy, there's certain things that we do repetitively, right? So what are some of the things that you're finding as you're switching into a new business that are like wash, rinse, and repeat?
Yeah, it's exactly what you said. Write it down. I found myself as I'm going through something, running a machine, boxing up an order. I'm writing down how I'm doing it because I want it done the same way the next time, so the customer has the same experience each time. So that's the first thing. I also wanted to add. You talked about being at a conference with a bunch of people on the podcast. What better way to find processes than to go to opportunities like that where you can learn from other people? That's one of the things that I'm thankful for, is that I've been in some 20 million, $30 million privately owned shops, and you better bet those people had some very good processes to get to where they were at.
Yeah, you don't get to that size, you don't get to that scale if you're not writing stuff down, right? It can't all be inside of your own head.
Yeah.
Um, one of the things that I encourage guys, because one of the frustrations that I found in business is like, no one's doing it the way that I said to do it, and well, but I never had it written down. So keep a little notebook with you. And as you're going through your day and you're doing these repetitive things, whether it's how you greet the customer or it's how you start the service call, start the diagnostic, or like Andy said, how you're boxing up an order and preparing it for the customer so that experience is the same always. Write it down. Just take some notes. It doesn't have to be formal as you're starting. It just has to be written down so that you can begin to understand, okay, these are the things that I'm doing every time, and then you can clean it up after that, right? So what was your experience in not having process written down? I know you helped implement some, but it
Yeah.
still wasn't quite at that point yet.
Yeah, so you're always, sometimes when you're in positions where there are no processes, and it's just really chaos, and it can be organized chaos in a way to where people kind of know what they should be doing, but you have more than one person doing the same thing at different times, and it just becomes very inefficient. And you can kind of get lost in it because you can look around and be like, wow, everybody's busy. But then when you really sit down and examine it, you're like, oh, okay, well, some of these people were busy doing the wrong thing. And this is why this took so much longer. You know, practicing. So having the processes in place, having them written down, but not practicing them with your team, I think is almost a waste of time. Sit down with the team and walk through these situations and make sure you're practicing. Okay, if this happens, this is how we're going to do it, or this is how I want you to enter the customer's house or knock on their door. These are all things you could practice in a training room. Might be a little awkward, but it's still very good time spent.
Well, and there's something important to that. They're all doing the same thing, but they're doing it at different times. And how many times have we walked into a customer home and they've said, "Well, the last guy didn't he didn't do that, or he didn't do it that way," right? Like we confuse the customers when we are not doing the same thing on a repetitive manner, right? How many times did you guys experience recalls because process wasn't in place?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're in the industries we're in. We're installing things into people's customers' homes. With if those break, you're gonna always want to know why. And manufacturing is never perfect, so manufacturer defects are possible, but there are a lot of installation related issues when it comes to our industries. And like you said, following processes. And the installers, they're not doing it on purpose. I missed that one, but had it been written down, had there been checklists, things like that, maybe we catch it before we leave that house.
Well, and on the service side too, right? Like as we're going to diagnose something, are we paying attention to the same things every single time? Are we catching that flame sensor that's bad? Are we catching that thermal fuse that is maybe weak, right? Like all those things, if we have a dedicated process, if we have dedicated steps in order, we're not going to miss them, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's a mindset thing too. Doug and I tend to be the mindset guys, so I'm gonna drag you along with that, Andy Z. How many people were
Gotcha.
frustrated by not having process in place?
Yeah. Yeah.
Owners have these expectations, right? And they're frustrated because their team isn't doing it, and the team is frustrated because they feel like there's not communication. Did you ever have that happen at all?
Yeah, I think when you work, in these types of industries, you're always going to run into stuff like that eventually in your career. And it's a very uncomfortable position for everybody. Like you said, nobody likes it. And again, you sit there, you feel busy, everybody looks busy, but at the end of the day, you realize nothing got done, and it's because we didn't follow our processes. We didn't have dedicated duties installed into every position in the business. I mean, these are things that every business is going to struggle with. And like we talked about off air, processes are a funny thing because you can be successful without them, but you'll never get to that next level unless you have them.
Yep. What got you here is not going to get you there, right? You always
Right.
have to look at that next step of things. So, um, you're starting to write them down. are you getting them formalized yet? Are you getting your processes formalized yet, or are you just kind of in the early stages getting it on paper?
Yeah, early stages, and I'll be honest with you, they're still changing because I'm still learning things in
Mm.
this industry. I'm doing this an interesting way. I'm learning how to run the equipment actually. So, the two-head embroider, the DTG machine, the screen printing machine. I'm learning how to do it all rather than just providing it. So the learning curve is pretty large there. So I'm constantly changing them. But eventually, my plan, looking long term, is to have them written down in binders next to each machine. Hey, this is how we're going to do this. This is how we're going to do this. Eventually, when I have people running the machines for me, they'll do it the same way that I ended up finding was the best way to do it, and just make sure we're as efficient as possible inside the shop.
So I love that because it puts you at that learning stage like any future employees. You're just learning it.
Yeah.
So now tapping into your previous experience, how did you begin to document process for your previous company because you had a lot of experience? Were there things that you missed because you just did them automatically so you didn't write them down, or what,
Oh yeah.
like how did that work for you?
Yeah. The learning curve in that side of things was big too. At first, even with like our sales process, we were kind of winging it at first. And I still remember we took a trip to Ohio to watch another company, talk about opportunities to learn from others. And basically, when we left there, we were like, man, what were we doing? It completely changed everything. Not from that point on, our process, everything we did had a start and a finish, and it was like, oh, this is how we should have been doing this, and that was life changing. So seeing somebody else do it, it was just like, wow, where did we miss the boat on this? But it changed the company forever.
Yeah, there's a ton of value in networking. I was talking to, and you may or may not be familiar with them. I don't know if you guys use them, but Vulcan Lockring. Um, Great guys. It's solderless connections for refrigeration lines. And one of the things I heard from them is even the manufacturers don't necessarily have process in place correctly. So a lot of the issues with lockering came from the fact that the manufacturers took the training and then decided to make it their own instead of following the actual process of training lockering. They tweaked it, they did their own thing, and then problems happened because the process wasn't being followed. And
Yeah,
so, that just highlights the need for a process. So as we're doing things, as we're building these companies, from service calls to answering the phones to packaging up the materials for the customer to, you know, actually selling the repair or the replacement to the customer, having a process in place is so important because if we don't, things can happen along the way that cause bigger issues, right?
yeah.
Um, what would be your number one tip for someone either just starting out in business or like getting to that 1 to 2 man? We're starting to add some people on. Like, what's your tip for getting process in place?
For the 1 to 2 man guy, my biggest tip is make your processes yours. Be a little selfish there as the business owner. A lot of times some employees will come in, and it's good to take employees' opinions and run with them, but also, don't let them talk you out of things. Stick to what you want to do. Because it's your company, it's your vision. At the end of the day, who's going to be responsible for everything? For the guys starting out, I think because I'm in this position, um, you know, maybe a little bit of more pre-planning would have been nice. So if you're starting out, just starting a company, I would pre-plan more. My whole life I've done better working under pressure, putting things off to the last minute, but that's a very bad trait when you're getting into business ownership. So even though
No.
I work better that way. That's not how you want to run a business, and that's what I'm learning throughout this whole process, and it's been humbling. So
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. Yeah, I think the biggest thing, the number one tip is write it down. The number two tip is it doesn't have to be perfect, right? if you've been listening all along, you heard Andy say things are changing for him. He's writing this stuff down and he's finding different ways. And how many of us have experienced that in our own businesses or working for other businesses? Something is the way it is, and then all of a sudden, oh wait, there's a better way to do this, or oh wait, there's a step that I was missing there. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Write it down, get that base, get that foundation of a process in place, and then you can modify it as you go. So one of my biggest faults was I felt like it had to be perfect. Otherwise I couldn't give it to the guys. And so I would, start writing stuff, but it never made it to them because it was never perfect. But even that small part of process would have improved a lot of things. And something you hinted on, like, okay, here's my part of the process, but I could have received employee feedback and it could have just gotten that much better
Yeah.
because I had the feedback from the guys also doing it alongside me. Maybe they saw something that I didn't, but if you don't have it written down, if you don't have that process at least partially in place, no one can follow along with it, right?
Yeah. And go find the process too. Look up a big shop in not in your market area and say, hey, can I come watch you for a couple days? You'd be surprised how many guys would say yes to that. They've already figured it out, and you might be able to find some really good things there.
Yeah, and you can learn it from other industries too, right? It's there are certain things in service that cross the boundaries. It's not just, this is the way we do it, and so there are certain things that do cross those boundaries. That definitely learning from others. The conferences, those conferences are fantastic. We just got back from a week at PSA, Professional Servicers Association, the conference in Norfolk, Virginia. There's a lot of things that I heard this like, man, I wish I would have been around this when I was running my business in the day to day, because hearing some of these things, there's a lot of stuff that I could have implemented just to take it to that next level, right? One of the biggest companies in our area invited you into their shop in your
Yeah,
previous life, and you really got to learn from that as well. And that's a direct competitor that was like, yeah, come on over, learn.
absolutely. Yeah, direct. We're literally selling against this company in homes, and they let us tour their entire facility. And that's what I'm saying when I like reach out to these people, because you'd be surprised at who would say yes. I mean, he was a great guy, and was really an open book. And his philosophy was, if everybody else does it, better, then the whole industry gets better together. And I like that mentality, and we learned a lot from him. And anybody that's that successful, they figured something out to get to where they're at. So try to go there and be a sponge.
Yeah, I mean, it I love that. And if everyone in the industry is doing better, then the entire industry is better. And that is the purpose of Service Alliance Group, right? Our goal is to elevate the service industry, and that's why we share so much information. That's why we bring people on. That's why we go to these conferences and spend the time and the money to be there, to be able to bring this stuff to the industry, because maybe you guys aren't able to get out and do some of that stuff yet.
Yeah.
But don't make an excuse. Just like get out there and do it, because it's so valuable to learn these processes, and maybe there's a better way to do things or a faster way to do things than what you're doing, right? What are some of the other keys about that you would make a suggestion, either from your previous life or your current life that you're experiencing?
Yeah, the practicing part, I think, is huge. I think having dedicated time with your staff or your guys, your team, individual time, a little bit of group time. Nobody likes to learn, but make it fun. Do the best you can. But practicing, I think, is one of the biggest things. Me, myself, and my new business, when we were first firing up a machine, that's all we did. We would just print fake orders. We're practicing going through the process from taking the order through the website to putting it on the machine to boxing it, and we're not sending it anywhere. So that type, practicing and having that set time for it, I think is really important. And just keep being open to learning, because your processes will change over time as your company changes, and be open to some of that change too.
You spent 8 years at your previous company. Did you see process change in that time?
Yeah. And the company changed so much, and in good ways, and that's why the process has changed. And what we found was the company changing forced our processes to change. And that's what made us go out and find other people that did it before. And 8 years is a long time, so to think about how different we did things from the beginning, it's fun to look back at.
Yeah, there's value in learning lessons from the past. There's value in learning from other people doing it. Guys, if you have any questions on process that we haven't covered, let us know. We're going to be talking about process all week long. It's the theme. I was not good at process, and so that's why I start with just write it down, practice it, figure it out. You have to don't let perfection stop you from doing it, because partially done is better than perfect never done, right? So
having something is better than nothing.
Yeah, if you start to get it implemented, you can see that company begin to get to that next level. So your plan is to hire on more people. As you see it right now, what do you think the most important part of what you're implementing is going to be?
The customer facing stuff, anything, some of the shop stuff is in the background, nobody's really going to see a lot of it. That stuff you can kind of get away with a little bit. But as far as like the communication with the customer when they're placing orders, when we're gathering information, images, things like that, getting the order to the customer, those things I think is going to be the most important part of what I'm doing now, because that's what's going to make them come back to you. That's what's going to give you more business to grow. That's what's going to make them refer you. Hey, every time I order from these people, I talk to the same person and they do it the same exact way, and that has made it really easy. So that type of referral, if they can say that to other business owners, is really important for a person like me.
Yeah, I think there's wisdom in that. So many of us start in the wrong spot with process, right? I think focusing on the customer experience side of things is probably the most important, from how you answer your phone to how you show up to the service call or the install, right? Like, those customer front things matter more than anything else. Not that the other stuff doesn't matter, right? But if you want to be able to continue to add customers to your book of business, if you don't have the customer facing experience documented well, customers get confused. If they can't experience your company in the same way, whether it's Andy going out or it's Zach going out or it's Saul going out, right? Like, they have to experience our company in the same way every time. Now, each of us has our own flair to it, but the entire experience, the entire process should feel similar to them as we go. And I think so many don't start at the customer experience side of things.
Zach, what do you guys do after a job? Because this is where I think processes are really important. It makes you not forget the small things. So who's making the follow-up call? Who's sending out the thank you card? When is it getting done? Do you guys have like a process on everything getting done at the same time? Hey, this many days later, we're going to call them. This many days later, I'm going to send them a box of chocolate, or whatever you do for your thank you.
Yeah, the ops manager is just starting to put that in. So you want to talk about what got you here can't get you there. If you don't have those processes in place, you're always going to stay in that same spot or start going backwards. And so this entire year, 3JM has really been focusing on how do we make this process seamless, from all right, we got the phone call from the customer. We're going to inspect the roof. We're going to meet the adjuster, or we're going to, create the estimate for the retail customer. The crew comes out and they do what they're going to do. All right, now it's time to collect that final check, do the follow-up. We're beginning to get that really more in place. And I have conversations with our ops manager and my counterpart, who, Mikey.
Yeah.
We have conversations with him on a regular. So, and that's the other thing, like your most successful people within the business, find out what they're doing every single time and ask them a lot of questions to kind of figure out like what part of our process is working, what part of our process isn't working. Because if they're that successful, there's a good chance that they know what needs to be repeated time and time again, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, process isn't quite fully in place. It's a little clunky on that follow-up end. Everything from the beginning, the sales process into, getting the roof built, we have that pretty well on lock. It's not written down anywhere, which is one of the things that I've said to our ops manager, like, get it written down, get it in a handbook, get it in a sales book, get it in whatever. But that end of the process, it's still quite clunky, and isn't happening the same way. Customers aren't experiencing it the same way every time, and that's where that value in writing it down definitely comes into play. So you can see even a 20-year company, right? If you haven't written it down, it can be chaos, and there are times that it feels like chaos, and it can wear on the people doing the work when it's not written down. So
Another twist that we haven't talked about is, let's say you're, even an 8-year company, a 20-year company, a 50-year company, and what if one of your main people isn't there the next day? Maybe they leave, they get sick, they go on to another place. Can somebody go into that chair, open up a binder, and continue to do the critical tasks that those people have? If it's a billing person, can someone go in there and pay the bills? Can someone do payroll or get the information to your payroll person? These are that we found ourselves in where it's like, oh boy, how do we figure this out? And by the way, we got 2 days to figure it out because payday's Friday. So,
Yeah.
having that information handy, say, okay, even as a business owner, I can now sit in this seat, open up this binder, and figure out, because I can follow their process. And that's another important part of this too.
For sure, for sure. So many of us feel like if I'm not here, no one can do it, right? And there's books and books and books about like how to buy back your time and how to get people on board, but it starts with documenting it. It starts with having it in that binder. If you don't have a binder of these are the things that we do day in and day out, this is how a call runs, this is how you answer the phone, this is where the bank accounts are and how we run a deposit, how we do withdrawals, stuff like that. Like, if you don't have that stuff in place, you're in a world of hurt, man. When my office manager moved to Tennessee with her family, dude, we were screwed. Like, no one knew how to do what she did day in and day out because it wasn't written down anywhere. We kind of had to figure it out. We had to hurry up and figure it out on the fly. And thankfully she was willing to talk us through some of it, but still, had we documented it all along, it would have been as easy as picking up a binder. All right, here we go, and get someone new trained and out there and being successful. So I think a lot of us forget that part. And that's why I started with you talking about, like, you're just new in this. You're going to be bringing people on. Think of it from that learning like a baby stage, right? Like, we got to learn from step 1 and then we continue to move on. And a lot of us start at step 10 and forget steps 1 through 9, and no one knows how to do that. So they come in as a new employee and they're super frustrated, right? So man, I love it. I love it.
I think if anybody takes anything away from this, it should be go to your office employees, every employee, and say, hey, what are your top 10 critical tasks throughout the week? Create a list there. That way, you know what each position does, the top 10 critical things that they do, and then learn how to do them. Especially business owners in the service industry, we get so stuck in the field that, like you said, Zach, you lose touch with some of those things, and then somebody leaves, and it's like, oh boy, I haven't done this in 4 years because that person's been here. Now what do I do? I would have them write down their most critical tasks, so at least you can keep the doors open until you figure it out.
Yeah, and as you're you're the 1 and 2 man show, and you're starting to bring people on. That's why I say write it down. Write down everything you're doing now. Hand that piece of paper, that binder, off to the person that is replacing you doing that, right? Whether it's bookkeeping or service calls or answering the phone, whatever. Okay, here's what I've done so far. Make this better. Like, as you figure out what's working and what's not working, add to this list, and then let's go and formalize this after a couple months and figure out what's working. And then don't be afraid to change it down the road. Again, process is going to change as you find new and better ways to do it, but start with writing it down, then hand off the documenting it to whoever's doing that job, and get some valuable feedback, and then kind of formalize that process from there. It doesn't have to be perfect to start. You just have to start.
Yep.
So, and love it. Well, my internet's going to start going wonky, and the guys should be showing up any minute now. So hopefully that was helpful. And
I think we lost him. Well, if you're listening and you can't hear Zach and you can hear me, hopefully it was helpful. I'm sure that's what he was going to say. Everybody, hope you have a great week here. And hopefully Zach's internet catches up to him at some point today.
Yeah, we're losing it. I'm going to go ahead and end it. We'll catch you on the grind next time, guys.
See you, Zach.